Good morning. Welcome to the campaign office of Promo-LEX Election Monitoring Mission for the position of President of the Republic of Moldova that were organized yesterday, November the 1st, 2020. Now I will present the main findings of the mission. With regards to various aspects of the electoral process. But before that, before presenting the content, before presenting the findings, I would like to make some general comments. First, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to all of our colleagues, to short-term observers, the static short-term observers who stayed in the polling stations and monitored the whole electoral process from opening the polling stations until closing the stations and calculating the results. Also, would like to thank our short-term observers from the mobile teams that monitored the electoral process in the polling stations where we did not have any static observers, as well as the vicinity of polling stations. And of course, I have to express our gratitude to the long-term observers, to the operators who processed all the data collected from our short-term observers during the election day, and obviously to our colleagues from the central team who managed to prepare the public releases that we issued yesterday and today to inform everyone who is interested to find out more about the electoral process. And of course, we would like to extend our gratitude to voters, to our colleagues from mass media who proved to be active, dedicated, and sometimes even understanding for the aspects that are less pleasant of the electoral process. And last but not least, I believe all of us, we have to thank all of the colleagues that were involved in conducting the elections, electoral officials, police officers, representative of ministries of foreign affairs and European integration, who carried out conscientiously their duties and managed to organize the elections in a way that even if some incidents were found, for them to be settled as soon as possible, and to do our best, all of us, so that similar incidents are fewer in the second round of the elections. Of course, I would like to underline the support provided, both financial and technical support, that Promo-LEX Election Monitoring Mission received from our international partners. These are the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, Soros Foundation Moldova, Council of Europe, and our colleagues from the European Platform for Democratic Elections, who help us disseminate and inform the public with simultaneous translation of our press conferences. I reiterate the purpose of our reports and our findings are to prevent possible violations in the future, to inform the public, to inform people about the electoral process, and to formally notify the authorities, especially the law enforcement bodies and electoral bodies, so that they take actions in order to prevent similar situations in the future. I believe that a general conclusion of this election is clear, is obvious to everyone, and with your permission, I will present it, I will announce it before presenting the final results for the whole elections. The Parliament of the Republic of Moldova has the moral obligation to implement alternative voting mechanisms so that all voters who want to cast their votes, who have this right and want to cast their votes, to be able to do so not only via the traditional methods that we are all used to have, meaning by showing up in person to the polling station, but also using some alternative mechanisms. For the next elections, ordinary elections most probably, it would be good to come with legislative initiatives that would allow voters from the Republic of Moldova, but not only from the Republic of Moldova. I especially pay attention to our citizens from diaspora, citizens of the Republic of Moldova living in the Transnistrian area, and many other categories of voters who did not manage to come to polling stations due to various reasons. Some aspects I would like to mention about the methodology of what I will present further on. I have reiterated every time during this campaign that on the election day we will have 608 static observers who will monitor the electoral process from the opening of the polling stations until the vote tabulation. In the polling stations that are under the actual control of the constitutional authorities, and out of this sample, 42 polling stations opened for voters from the Transnistrian region are excluded, and also the polling stations for diaspora are excluded as well. The error margin of our sample is plus minus 1.8 percentage points, and we have tried to extrapolate those incidents that were found by our observers in the polling stations where we had observers throughout the whole country in order to see how many incidents would have been found if we had observers in each and every polling station. So that's the general methodology. And the last comment about the methodology. So at the end, when we compare with the preliminary official results announced by the Central Electoral Commission, the comparisons will be done with the total of the results, not only with the ones at the national level, because currently it's quite complex on the website of the Central Electoral Commission to try to make parallel tabulation with the polling stations opened in the country. Hence, the comparison will be done with the total results from all 2,143 polling stations. So, let's see what were the main findings of the observers regarding the equipment of the polling stations. To make sure that the social distancing of 1 meter is observed, our observers reported 37 cases in the sample where these requirements were violated, which means that similar situations might have been present in 111 cases countrywide. Regarding screening, the electoral officials, observers, and other stakeholders involved in the electoral process who are permanently in the polling stations, our observers reported at least 14 cases in this sample, which means that at the national level, about 40 cases could have been found. Regarding the accessibility of polling stations for persons with physical impairments, Then our observers reported 231 cases where the polling stations were not accessible fully, which means that at the national level there are at least 759 polling stations totally non-accessible. Regarding heating in the polling stations, at least 275 cases in this sample were reported not being heated properly, which means that at the national level there are at least 909 such cases. And using this opportunity, I would like to say that these figures are the highest. So I would like to draw the attention that for the second round of the elections, it would be good for all the authorities in charge to take all the necessary measures in order to solve this issue and to make sure that the polling stations are heated well, because it will be colder opening the polling stations before 7 a.m. or after 7 a.m. I have to say that a non-significant delay is of about a couple of minutes, and our colleagues have reported at least 100 cases in the samples, which means these are about 316 cases at the national level. So the opening of the polling stations were either a couple of minutes before 7 a.m. or a couple of minutes after 7 a.m. Presence of advertising materials, billboards and panels within the area of 100 meters. It's 7 cases in the sample, which means that about 24 such cases would have been found. Restricted access for observers or obstructing the free observation process. 2 cases in the sample extrapolated at the national level. It means that about 6 such cases might have been found. Failure to seal properly the ballot boxes or breaking, damaging the seals. 8 cases in the sample, which means that there are about 26 cases, according to the estimates, at the national level. Unjustified presence of non-authorized persons in the area of the polling stations or within the polling stations. 17 cases in the sample, according to estimates, at least 50 cases at the national level. Stopping the videotaping of electoral process when they should be filmed according to the law. 9 cases in this sample, and about 33 such cases could have been found at the national level. Restricting the access to the polling stations for voters with symptoms of acute respiratory diseases, COVID-19, 7 cases in the sample, which allows us to estimate about 24 cases at the national level. Limiting the access in the polling stations for voters who do not have a face mask and gloves. 4 cases in the sample, which means about 13 estimated cases at the national level. Rumors, attempts, or even situations of giving in-kind awards for voting within the area of the polling station. 5 cases found in the sample, which means that we can estimate about 16 cases at the national level. Electioneering or black PR within the area of 100 meters from the polling stations. 5 cases in the sample, 12 at the national level. Organized transportation of voters, 11 cases in the sample, which means that we can estimate at least 37 cases at the national level. Violence or intimidation of voters or other stakeholders involved in the electoral process. 5 cases registered in the sample. We can estimate about 37 cases countrywide. Deficiencies in the operation of elections information system. 15 cases in the sample, And perhaps we have a mathematical error here. A bit more than 14 cases countrywide. Deficiencies in lists of voters, 21 cases in the sample, and we can estimate 40 cases at the national level. Taking a picture of ballot papers and other violations of the secret of vote, 36 cases in the sample. We can estimate 57 such cases at the national level. Unjustified group voting, 10 cases in the sample. We can estimate a number of 96 cases at the national level. Stopping, suspending the voting without any grounds, 3 cases in the sample, 9 cases estimated at the national level. Refusal to issue a copy of the votes tabulation protocol, 3 cases in the sample, and we can estimate 13 such cases at the national level. So these are the main incidents reported by our colleagues, by static observers who monitored the electoral process in the 608 polling stations in the sample. And now we can see who were the ones who caused the incidents. So we can see that in 92 cases, meaning most of the cases, the incidents are caused by voters. Electoral officials rank the second, 59 cases, public officials 24 cases, observers 14 cases, candidates 10 cases, and other persons 52 cases. Who was affected by the incident? According to our observers, most of the times incidents affected the voters, 100 cases, candidates 35 cases, observers 30 cases, electoral officials 16 cases, public officials 4 cases, and other persons 66 cases. On this screen you can see now, and we can compare the results with the results of other elections on the basis of the incidents reports from the previous elections and the extrapolation at the national level. So we can see that the presidential elections, so we make the comparison with the presidential elections of 2016 for both rounds, parliamentary elections of 24th of February 2019, and presidential elections of November the 1st, 2020, according to the national estimations on the basis of the sample. So as you can see, most of the incidents were found by our observers at the parliamentary elections, 1,020 cases. Speaking about presidential elections, the estimates for this year's presidential elections would have been 489 incidents, which is a bit higher than in the second round of elections of the presidential elections of October 30th, 2016. And here we can see certain aspects that can be underlined. We can see that only in certain separate cases there is an increase, but most types of incidents have decreased in number. So there is an increase for the unjustified group voting from 83 to 96. Non-justified presence of unauthorized persons from 46 to 50, and we have, if I'm not mistaken, from 34 to 37, violence or intimidation of voters or of other people. So these are the incidents, the number of which increased. As for the rest, the trends are downwards. On this screen, you can see how the score of candidates evolved depending on the number of protocols processed. The red line shows, and the yellow line shows the first two candidates, green the third one. So red is Mr. Dodon, yellow Maya Sandu, and green Renato Usate. As you can see, these diagrams do not underline any unexplainable fluctuations, which means that, generally speaking, the processing of results and votes tabulation was done within the normal limits. If we are to analyze the results from the country, except for the polling stations abroad and except for the polling stations for voters from the Transnistrian region, the current president obtained a bit higher score than Maya Sandu, so she ranked the second, and Mr. Renato Usate came the third. But as I've said, we had observers in the diaspora, and we tried to make the same mathematical procedures to check if there were some unexplainable fluctuations in the polling stations in diaspora. Even if they were not included in the previous diagram, we can see that in diaspora, Maya Sandu ranks the first, Renato Usate the second, and the current president, Mr. Dodon, ranks the third. And the same comparison with the polling stations for voters from the left bank of the Dnistru River, I underline these are not included in the first diagram, which covers 608 national sample. So for voters from the left bank of the Dnistru, Mr. Dodon ranks the first, Maya Sandu the second, and Renato Usate the third. And now let me present the preliminary data of votes tabulation for each candidate. I underline one more time, our results refer only to the polling stations established on the territory of the country, except for the polling stations for Transnistrian voters and for diaspora. According to our sample, current president Mr. Dodon accumulated a score of 35.56% in the country. Maya Sandu ranks the second, 33.37%, and in the second line you can see a comparison with the total results per country announced by the Central Electoral Commission. Renato Usate ranks the third, 16.64%, according to Promo-LEX sample, 16.90%. The results, the total results per country, according to CEC results, 6.49 on the basis of data announced by CEC. 3.08% Promo-LEX sample. For Mr. Andrei Nastase, 3.26%, according to the data announced by Central Electoral Commission, 2.12%, Octavian Tsiku, 2.01% data announced by the Central Electoral Commission. Mr. Tudor Diliu, 1.45% Promo-LEX sample, 1.37% CEC preliminary data. Mr. Dorin Chertoacă, 1.2%, both according to Promo-LEX sample and according to CEC announced data. I have said this previously, and every time we make such a comment when there are errors in the protocols filled in by electoral officials. So I reiterate that we had and we included in these calculations 608 polling stations where we had static observers of the total of 1,962 polling stations monitored in the country. So from one polling station we have not received the protocol, and the protocols received from 27 polling stations contain certain errors. Errors in the mathematical formulas that are approved by the Central Electoral Commission, because the Central Electoral Commission has established a number of ways of checking in order to find the errors. So let's see the types of errors. For the following formula, if the number of voters who received ballot papers is bigger or the same as the number of voters who participated in the voting process, we have only one error. Regarding the verification formula, if the number of voters who participated in the voting process is equal with the number of ballot papers declared as non-valid and the total number of votes valid, we have 9 errors. For the formula, if the number that reflects the difference between the number of ballot papers received by voters and the number of voters participating in the voters equals with the number of voters who received ballot papers minus number of voters who participated in the voting, we have 6 protocols with errors. For the formula, if the number of ballot papers declared as non-valid is equal with the number of voters who participated in the voting minus the number of valid votes cast, we have 9 protocols with such an error. If the number of ballot papers coincides, so the number of ballot papers received at the polling station coincides with the number of voters who received ballot papers minus number of ballot papers non-used or with errors invalidated, we have 9 errors, and unfortunately we have 14 valid 14 protocols with errors. Well, the total number of votes does not equal with summing up the votes for each separate candidates, and 12 errors where the number of ballot papers not used and not should be the same as the number of ballot papers received by the polling station minus the number of voters who received ballot papers. So as I have already mentioned, and I reiterate one more time, in total we have 27 protocols with errors. These are protocols that have errors at one verification formula, and there are some protocols that have errors for several verification formulas. So these are the main findings that we've made as of this morning. I want to thank you very much for your attention. And according to the data collected by Promo-LEX observers and the data calculated on the basis of this sample by the central team of Promo-LEX mission, it is obvious that no electoral candidate accumulated enough votes to win from the first round, and a second round of elections will have to be organized when the final results are announced by the Central Electoral Commission. And candidates Maya Sandu and the current president Igor Dodon will fight in the second round. These are the main findings. I thank you very much for your attention, and as most probably the Central Electoral Commission will announce the second round of elections, we will wait for you in about 2 weeks on Friday at 10:30 a.m. for the next press conference, where we will present the last report, the last interim report on the conduct of the campaign for the second round of the elections. Having said that, if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer them. If not, I thank you very much for your attention. I wish you a calm day, to all of you, health, and we'll see each other in 2 weeks, here in the same room for the next press conference. Thank you very much.